Okay, so before we start, few things you should have, but it's not necessary. Is you need to have an account on a cloud provider. It can be DigitalOcean, AWS, anything, doesn't matter. But you need a VM and you need a domain. But if you do not have any of these, then it's okay. You can just watch along and do it later in your own leisure. This is the reference material. So these slides were originally meant for a workshop held at SUTD, but it's been adapted for Force Asia. And disclaimer number two is that there's a lot of different tools that you can use to do what we are doing today, but we're only gonna be covering a small set. So what we're gonna be using, uh, first one is Google Cloud Platform, which we'll be using to create our VMs, and an SSH client, which can be OpenSSH or PuTTY, and a web browser to just check our web deployment. Alright, so step one is create a VM, and the first thing you will need to do is to create an SSH key. So on POSIX platforms, you can just use SSH keygen. It should be included in most, if not all, distros, and you can just use this to create a key pair. So uh, if you run this, I'm using WSR here, so you can run SSH keygen. There's something wrong. Keygen -t rsa -f main and a username. Okay, there seems to be something wrong with WSL, but if you run these two commands, then you should be able to get a public and private key. Then you can use this command to actually SSH into your VM. So that is it for Linux and Mac OS. But on Windows, we can use an app called PuTTY. So if you install PuTTY, you should have another application called PuTTygen included. So it looks something like this, and all you need to do is make sure the key type is RSA. This you can leave it as B and click on generate. Move your mouse a bit, and it will generate a key for you. In the comment, you can put in the username. So I'm going to use the first part of my email, and that's it. You can click on save private key and save it to your desktop because you will need it later, and this one is your public key. So yeah, that's how you create an SSH key. So I think we can start on our initial deployment. So the first thing you need to do is to create a VM. So for this workshop, I'm gonna be using Google Cloud, but as I said earlier, you can use any cloud provider. It's all gonna be mostly the same. So on GCP, you can go to Compute Engine, then click on Virtual Machines, and once that loads, you can just click Create, and once that loads, you can give your VM a name. I'm gonna call it Force Asia for now. Leave these as it is. If you wanna save some money, you can go to the smallest machine, which is a F1 Micro, and everything else should be the same. And for firewall, you can allow HTTP and HTTPS for now. So once you click create, you should be able to see the VM being created. And it's gonna take a while. So so once we get into our VM, what we'll be using is using Workzerg, which is uh, which is an inbuilt server that comes bundled with Flask. So it's basically the server that runs when you type in Flask run or something like that. So yeah, so here we have our external IP. Yeah, hi. Yeah, so uh, we've just created our VM. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, sure. Do you have an account on GCP or AWS? An account on GCP or AWS? It's okay. AWS is also fine. So you need to create a virtual machine first on AWS. I think you can go to EC2. So you can. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Then you click on edit, and you basically add your SSH key to your VM. So over here you can see there's a 0 SSH keys. You can click and paste it in. Then over here you should see your username popping up. If it does, then you can just click save, and once it updates, you should be able to use this SSH key to connect to your VM. Yeah. For Windows, you can use this app called Putty. So Putty is basically an SSH client specifically for Windows. Yeah, you can download it at putty.org, and it comes with two applications. So one is Putty, which is the SSH client, and it also comes with PuttyGen. It looks something like this. Then all you need to do is click on generate, move your mouse a bit, and it will create a key. Then to specify the username, you can just change the comment to your username. Yeah, then this is your public key, which you can just copy from here, and your private key, you can just click the save button. Yeah, but I already have one, so I'm not gonna save this particular one. So yeah, let me add my other private key here. Okay, so once you have your SSH key in your VM, you should be able to SSH into your VM. So that is actually quite easy to do. What you can do is run SSH, and as you can see here, -i, then your path to the private key, not the public key, the private key, and then your username and the external IP of your VM. So the username is the same one that you use to create the key, and in case you forget it, you can always check the public key, and it will be the last word basically. So for me, I will do SSH-i home directory main, and my username is sshmchk, and then I will find the external IP, which your cloud provider should tell you, and paste that in, and just say yes to this, and that's it. You have successfully connected to your VM. So the easiest way to know if you've connected to your VM is if you type, it takes a long time to show up because it's not as responsive. Because you type, it sends the request to the server. The server says, yes, I got that character, then it comes back. And this happens for each and every character, so it takes a long time. So you can noticeably, when you type, you can notice the delay. So yeah, that's an easy way to know if you've actually SSH. So you can check, another thing you can check is LSB release-a, which will tell you, the distro that you're running. So here I'm running Debian 10. Yeah. Standard procedure to do when you first create a VM is to update. So sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. This will just update all the packages. This is the same as Ubuntu. So yeah, once this is done, we should be good to use our VM to deploy apps. Okay, so for this workshop, we have a website pre-built. So it's available on this GitHub repository. It's quite simple. It is just a Flask app, and it just returns this HTML file. Yeah, it is quite simple. So once this is done, Let's just wait for it. Yeah, so what we're gonna be using is Workzer, which is an inbuilt web server, which comes bundled with Flask. So Flask is a web framework that's it's a web framework for Python. So it's a server that comes with it, and you can just Flask run or Python 3 or file, and it will just run. So once this is done, we can do that. Seems to be taking a long time. But yeah, in the meantime, maybe I can show you how to use Putty. So for Putty, what you do is you go to SSH, then you click on Auth, and click on the private key. Then you select the private key. Go back to session and paste your external IP. Once you do that, you can just press yes, type in your username, and you should be in. Yeah, this is taking a long time. Okay, while that's going on, okay, it's almost done.
It's taking very long.
Yeah.
Update usually is this long.
Yeah, I think this is like I think the package that's installing is quite huge. I think it's like 300 MB. Yeah, so it's taking a while. Yeah. Okay.
300 MB, done 300 MB. Not that often.
Yeah.
Unless you have something else inside.
Yeah, usually doesn't take this long, but okay. In the meantime, I'm gonna.
I don't know what server they're using, but my machine is 10 years old. I'm
Yeah.
not kidding. I have the receipt to prove it, by the way.
Yeah, but no, this is actually like a very weak machine. It's only one core and like 600 MB of RAM. So like even a 10-year-old computer is probably faster than this. Yeah. Uh, Actually, yeah, it shouldn't take this long. I have no idea why it's taking this long. But let me open another one. SSH back in. And what I'm gonna do is just download these files. So oh, I actually need to install wcat. Oh no. Why is it stuck? Okay. I think I'm just gonna restart.
Oh, this is something that we have to pay for, this Bluetooth classes.
I mean, the first 750 hours are free. So yeah, I mean, if you stay within that, you should be okay. 750 hours is a bit more than 1 month. So yeah, they have a free tier, I believe. I think you can go to, I don't know, a cloud. Yeah, so if you go to Compute Engine, there's one free micro instance per month, and I believe AWS and Azure also have like the same offer. So yeah, I it is free. Yeah, yeah. It is. I think this machine has some problem with it. I'll create a new one. Okay, let's try SSHing into this one. Okay, this one works. So I'm gonna sudo apt install wget and unzip just to get the files onto here. So I'm gonna get unzip master cd skull cloud, and the files are all here. So I'm gonna move this directory to home and cd dot and this rm master.zip. Okay, now if you see the files that we have a main.py and a requirements.txt. So if you're familiar with Flask development, then main.py is essentially your entry point to the web app, and you can see the contents is basically it just creates a Flask app, then says at the root, you just display this HTML file. Yeah, and I'm sorry. Oh no! You can just look at it like this. Yeah, it's just a simple web app. You can use anything really, as long as it's Flask for this one. So yeah, so we have this web app, and the easiest way to deploy it is just to run it locally. So cd files python3 main.py, and you need to install Flask. So first you need to apt install python3 python3-pip. Press yes, let it install. Okay, so you can just pip3 install Flask, and yeah, that should be enough. So you can just run the main file, and you have a working server basically. So if you go to the external IP now, you won't be able to access anything. So if you see, if I try to connect to port 4000, which is where it's served, or it's 5000. So if I try to go to port 5000, it won't let me connect basically, because most of these cloud providers have a security feature, so they will block all ports by default. So what you can do to fix that is manually allow port 5000 on the firewall. So doing that is quite simple. So in GCP, you go down here, VPC network, and there's a firewall here. So you create a new rule and call it something useful like allow Flask, and then you create a tag. So tag is basically what GCP uses to apply this firewall rule to specific instances. So what you will do is you create this tag here, then you will use that tag on your VM to allow that firewall, to make that firewall applicable to that specific VM. So this tag can be anything, but to keep it descriptive, let's call it 5000. Oh, okay, so Flask 5000. And source IP ranges. So for here, this is basically restricting the IP addresses that can pass through the firewall. So since our app is going to be public, we want to allow all IP addresses. So the shorthand for that is 0.0.0.0/0. So what this means basically is allow all IP addresses from all subnets. It just means that anyone can connect to it. And we want to allow port 5000, and just create the rule. While that's creating, you can edit your instance, and here you can see a network tag. So I've already enabled HTTP and HTTPS, which is port 80 and 443. These are all very standard. Then here you can just add Flask 5000, and this will allow 5000 port to be accessible. So is it this one? Yeah, so here you can see applicable to instances, and you can see our instance one here. So if I try refreshing this now, it should show our VM. Okay, these things usually take a while to propagate, so maybe that's what's causing it to be so slow. Oh, I think I know what's wrong. I think the port is being blocked by the network here. So let me just try and VPN.
This link has,
Yeah, I think it's the network here that's blocking it. Because there's like no requests here, so I am not sure what's going on. Okay, I, I'm gonna try running this on port 80. Yeah. Okay, basically, okay, this this is probably being blocked by the network, but you should be able to see the Python app on this URL at this moment. But the thing is that the server we are running is not very, it's not very optimized. So as you can see here, even though the environment is production, it tells you here that this is not a development server, and please use a production deployment, because basically there's a lot of this is more meant for development purposes. So this is more oriented to features like hot reload. So you know, when you're like coding, then you just save, then the server will automatically reboot to show your updated files. Yeah, so what we're gonna do is actually create this production deployment. So for that, let's introduce our architecture. So our architecture will look something like this. So this is taken from another website. So instead of a REST client, we will just have a normal web browser over here. So what we will have is an SSL connection eventually that will go to our nginx reverse proxy, and this will go to these three gunicorn worker instances. So gunicorn is uh, okay, don't have it, but gunicorn is something that um, it's a WSGI server, so it's a web server gateway interface. So if you can see here, what it does is the web browser tells the web server to get this specific URL, and then the web server interfaces with gunicorn and tells it specifically what to do. So what this is saying is I want this URL, then nginx tells gunicorn that I want this specific route. So if you see our main.py, what gunicorn says that I want to run hello, this function. So it is more direct in a way. So yeah, so what we're gonna do right now is set up the WSGI server. Before that, I think we should go over what a reverse proxy is. So if you're familiar with it, then a forward proxy is basically someone running a machine somewhere. Then you tell that machine, I want this website. Then then that machine goes and gets the website and sends it back to you. So it's in the early days it was the precursor to VPNs basically, because the website itself does not know your IP address, but companies found a way around it. So yeah, so reverse proxy is the same thing in the reverse order. So people come to you, your web server, and the web server tells you this is the IP address. Then it goes to the IP address, gets the stuff, and then passes it back to the client.
So is reverse proxy is firewall?
Oh no, it's not a firewall. It's basically you can it's sort of like uh, so say I want to go somewhere. Say I want to go to google.com. So I go to google.com. What my browser does is it goes to a reverse proxy. Then the reverse proxy tells me which machine is google.com. Then we'll go get the files for me, come back, and then pass the files back to me. Yeah, it's I don't know how to say this. It basically goes to a place and gets the files for you, similar to a forward proxy. Yeah, but just it's all in reverse basically. Yeah. So why do we need a reverse proxy? If we need anything, then gunicorn devs tell us it is strongly recommended to use it behind the proxy server. The reason would be for performance reasons. If you just run gunicorn, what happens is we use a socket, a Unix socket. So it's used for inter-process communication. But if you just expose the socket, there's a lot of overhead because every time you make a request, it goes into it goes into kernel mode basically. So there's a lot of overhead. So using our proxy, which runs in user mode, is much more efficient. So what we are building versus what just running our app like this does is it will be able to handle way more concurrent traffic, even with the smaller instance size we have. It will be more stable. So if the machine gets taken down or is rebooted, it will automatically heal itself or just restart itself, and it will be more secure because we're going to use SSL and easy to scale up. Yeah. So setting up our WSGI server. So we'll be using gunicorn. So installing gunicorn is actually quite easy. You can just pip3 install gunicorn. And this one is Linux only. So if you try to do it on Windows or on Mac OS, it will just error out. Because I mean, all servers on all servers run on Linux basically. Yeah. So once you have installed gunicorn, just to test, you can run gunicorn on a port instead of a socket. So for that, you can use -- bind, and then you can bind it to port 5000. And there's another important aspect here is where you need to point to the Flask callable object. So if you go to our main.py, here you can see we create a Flask object here. This is called a callable object basically. So what gunicorn does is it calls this specific app object and then uses it to process requests. So we need to point our gunicorn workers to this specific instance or this specific object. So what we do is gunicorn -- bind, which tells it which port to run on. I think I'm gonna try 80. I don't know if it's gonna work. And then we need to point it to our Flask object. So the syntax is the file name colon the object name. So here our file name is main, and our object name is app. Oh no. What is this? Gunicorn. Okay, I know why this is happening. Okay, so what you need. So what gunicorn needs is a virtual environment. So virtual environment is basically something to isolate your instance or your code from the rest of the server. So what you should do is sudo apt install python 3 - virtual environment or venv, and then you can create a virtual environment by running python 3 - m venv, and then your environment name, which I just call env, and then you can activate your environment by running source env bin activate. Yeah, so once you're inside your virtual environment, you should see this env in brackets before your bash prompt. So that way you know you're inside your virtual environment. So you need to install Flask again and Gunicorn.
What like the site that tells you how to set up Flask. That's all.
Okay, okay. So you can Gunicorn run this. Retrying. Can't connect to it. Okay. Yeah. Basically, you bind it to a port, and I mean usually if you go to your external IP at like port 5000, you should be able to see it. But
Does it matter if you use uppercase Flask and lowercase Flask? Because what I thought it was a lowercase Flask.
no, it doesn't matter. Oh, you mean when you
Like over here, you
when you pick three install?
oh, 53. Okay, alright. Because I'm using 3 also.
Yeah, I think Python 2 is like no longer supported. Yeah, I think there is a difference between lowercase and uppercase.
Flask.
Yeah, I think it's capital.
Yeah, I actually did this procedure a couple of months ago.
Uh, I think when you use it in the file, then you use
Oh, I see. Okay, because
yeah
the F is a uppercase Flask.
yeah
That's what it is.
yeah. So I mean, for some reason this doesn't work, but yeah, if you go to that IP address, then you should be able to see it on any other network. But yeah, nothing to do about that. So running this is fine, but the issue is running it like this is if I close this prompt, like if I terminate my SSH session, then the server will stop running. Or even if I decide to keep this prompt open for 24/7, it's still not good enough because sometimes GCP or AWS will randomly decide to just restart your machine. Then you have to do this again. So an easy way to fix that is using systemd. So I don't know if you know about systemd, but it is basically something that runs every time at startup. So when you boot, Linux kernel loads in, then the first thing that the Linux kernel boots is systemd. It basically just initializes everything else apart from the kernel. So yeah, if you check PID1, it's probably gonna be systemd. So yeah, you can use systemd to
Okay, machines still not running system.
yeah. I think most systems use systemd.
Hotspot. Hotspot is, I think there are very few machines doing running hotspot.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a few alternatives like run it or something like that. X run it.
Very old school.
Yeah, but yeah, most distros nowadays use systemd. So that's the standard. So I think we can use systemd. So what you can do is create services. So systemd services. So creating that is quite simple. So what you can do is sudo touch /etc systemd system, and then here you can create your service name. You can call it anything, but I'm going to call it Flask, and then it should end with a dot service, flask.service. Yeah, then you can just edit it. Systemd system Flask. Oh yeah.
I thought it was Debian is one of those that still uses Hotspot. I thought.
I don't think
The
so.
Debian, I mean the classic Debian, not the good.
I mean, this is classic Debian. Like this is.
And they are already running system B from day one.
I think like they've been using systemd since like Debian 7 or 8. I'm not sure. But like as long as I've been using Debian, they've been using systemd.
And right now, all of course,
Yeah, I mean, but yeah.
last ones of
can't hear, sorry.
They were about the last few distros.
Oh yeah. Because they're like very LTS focused as well. Yeah. I think like 99% of the distros run systemd now, but like the distros that don't use it, their main like selling point is that they don't use systemd. Because like in the Linux community, there's a lot of people who don't like systemd because it's very slow, basically. Yeah. So there's like alternatives like I think it's called like Run It. Yeah, Run It. So like some distros use Run It as a feature of the distro because it's supposedly a lot faster. I've never used it, so I don't know. Yeah, but systemd is what most people use. So yeah, it's systemd is the default on BSD also. So I guess it's good enough. I guess if it's good enough for BSD, then it's good enough for everyone. Yeah. So systemd, it has its own unique configuration type. So first thing we want to describe is a unit. This is a unit. So this is just metadata about our service. So we just want to put in like a description maybe, or let's just call it our GUnicorn instance. And what we need is another thing called after. So for after is basically it is when the system starts up. There's many checkpoints. So what we want is basically our app to run after the network is available. So the tag for that is network.after. So network.target. So what this says is basically only run the service once the network is active and running. Yeah, so the next part is the main stuff, which is service. Here we will define what user we run as, the group we run as, the working directory, then the environment, and an exec start. Yeah, so for the user, what I would suggest doing is just run as your own user. And for the group, you probably want www-data. So this group is it's a default group available in most of the mainline distros. It's basically a group with you and your web server. So in this case, it will be my user and nginx. Yeah. This is a security feature basically. So if someone somehow gets access to our VM, then if the group is just www-data, then they will only have access to our web files rather than the whole machine. I mean, if they have access to our web files, it's bad, but not as bad as getting hold of the whole machine. But yeah, www-data. Working directory is basically like where you will CD into to run the rest of the stuff. So for me, it was home sshmchk / files, I believe. Yeah. Okay. The reason why you want to specify the user is because systemd by default runs as root. So yeah, I mean, it comes back to the same thing. If someone gets access to your web server, if you give them root access, they basically can do anything they want with your server. So this is like sort of like fencing the stuff you have for a hacker to do. You just want to delay them as long as possible. Alright, so the next thing is environment. This one comes in quotes, and you just want to specify a path. So our path will be the environment directory. So home sshmchk files and bin. Yeah. So the environment variable is basically this bin folder and the bin folder has like activate and a few other bash files. They can just use to like activate the environment. Well, yeah. Then the last one is the most important one, exec start. It is basically the command that is used to start up gunicorn. So what you do is you go sshhm chk files and bin gunicorn, and then basically we will use the same command that we used earlier. So if you remember, it was dash dash bind 0.0.0.0 5000 main app. Yeah, this should work. So it's essentially doing the same thing we did on the terminal, but as a service file. And yeah, and last thing we want is install, and just wanted by equals multi-user.target. Yeah, okay, I won't go into too much detail about what the wanted by is, but it's basically if what happens is there's like multiple run levels for system D. So run level 0 is like when the kernel has just forked system D, then run level 1 is I don't remember, but run level 1 is it's a rescue shell, so like when you call grub or something like that. Then 2, 3, 4 is all multi-user target, so it's basically a non-graphical shell, and 5 is a graphical shell. So if you use like GNOME shell or console, that is number 5, run level 5, and number 6 is reboot and shutdown. So by saying it's wanted by multi-user target, it's basically saying run this when you have a shell available, basically. So to run this service, there's two things you need. The first one is an active network. So that is specified by line 3, and you must have a shell active, which is determined by the last line. If these two conditions are met, then the gnicon server will start running. Yeah, but we're actually gonna use something else. Thanks. Yeah, so what we're gonna change here is instead of bind, we're gonna use a Unix socket. So, okay, if you don't know what a Unix socket is, you can see the man file. So, creates an endpoint for communication. So it's basically a way for two processes in the same machine to communicate with each other. So using sockets creates less overhead than a different sort of a port. So if you see the port uses ASINet, so it uses IP4 protocol, which has more overhead than local communication. It's AF Yeah. So what we're gonna use is
This is the metric for socket.
yeah. For socket. Yeah. So we're gonna use sockets because the only thing this Unicon instance is gonna be talking to is the nginx server, which is running on the same machine. So yeah, we can just use local communication, which is gonna be a lot less overhead. So to use that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna bind. Instead of binding to a port, we're gonna bind to a Unix socket. So for that, we can just call Unix : and then name our socket. So I'm just gonna call it flask.sock. Yeah. A few other things you can do is the workers parameter. So what this will do is create three workers. So if we go back to our slide here, you can see that there's three workers here. So say if one of these workers is like very busy, then the load balancer can automatically route it to number 2 or number 3. Yeah. So that's what workers tree is for. And another security feature we can do is -m007. So if you're familiar with how to use Tron, it's basically telling us that no access to user, no access to group, and access to everyone else. So what this does is, again back to the hacker scenario, if they have access to your user, then they can see the files, they can read the files, but they can't do anything because they can't write, they can't execute. But the reason why we allow everyone else is for recovery. So say like you want to like recover the machine that the hacker has access to, so then you can just create a new user and use that to delete the old user and essentially recover the machine. And it's faster that way because your only other option if we don't do this is to delete the entire machine and create it from scratch again, which is quite time consuming.
What is the purpose of the user ID?
Oh no, it's the file access mask.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. The same thing used in Chon. Yeah. So okay. I don't know what it's called. Chon.
Yeah.
You know, right? Chon new numbers. Yeah. So execute is 4, then read is 2. No, write is 2, and
Seven is all.
yeah.
Everybody, everything.
Yeah. So the first one is user, the second one is group, and the third one is everyone else. Yeah. So what we're doing is no access to the user, no access to the group, but access to everyone else.
So only the owner gets.
No, everyone else gets access basically.
Yeah.
So what happens is if the hacker gets access to this server, they will only have access to this group on this line and this user on this line. But since the way we have run this file is these two don't have access, so essentially if the hacker enters the service, he has access to nothing. So it's kind of a lockout, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's basically a security feature. But yeah. So once we have that, we can sudo system ctl start flask, and then we can check the status. And yeah, there we go. We have our G-Unicorn workers running here at PID. These three PIDs.
System CTL start and status.
Oh,
I know I've used that before, but what does it do with background?
yeah. System CTL is just the way you use system D. Yeah. And if you can see here, then the /etc runs in system D. So yeah, maybe you've been using system D, but you don't know about it.
No, I knew there is such a concept called system, but that was everything.
Okay.
And this,
now
and
you
this
know.
thing executes it, and this thing initializes.
Yeah. Now you know. So what you can also do is system ctl enable. Yeah. So enable will just allow it to run once the system is rebooted. Yeah. Yeah. That is WSGI servers. So at this point, we have a WSGI server running in our Unix socket. So what we need is nginx, which will expose the web app to the rest of the world, basically. Because right now, if you go in to the external IP, since the socket is constrained to the local machine, you won't be able to access it. So we need nginx to access it from outside to the outside world. So first thing you need is sudo apt install nginx. But it's straightforward. Yep. Okay, so once you have installed nginx, the configuration is somewhat similar to systemd. So what you do first is you create a file and /etc nginx sites available, and here you create a file. So for consistency's sake, I'm gonna use the same name. So Flask, and then I'm gonna vim. I'm just gonna edit that file. Yeah. So the nginx configuration is something similar to JSON. It's quite different from Apache if you use that, but I prefer nginx a lot more. So what you have basically is a server block. So this is like one server configuration. So you have a server, then what you have is the next thing you need is a listen at. So what this tells nginx is to listen to port 80, and the next thing is server name. So here you should put your external IP. With none of this. Yeah, so what these two lines basically says that when you get a request from that IP and it's from port 80, then run this specific lines, which I'm gonna show next. So next, what you need is location. Yeah, so this is where we're gonna tell nginx what to run when the first two conditions are met. So we just need to run.
So if you go into, let's say Google or DuckDuckGo,
Yeah.
what's my IP address? Should be this IP address.
Oh no, there's the name of the domain.
Because that's your, I think, the server name of the IP address.
Oh no, that is not the server name. That is
The IP address of your external IP address.
no, that's the IP address on which the server is gonna run on. Which is for like.
Because if you say IP-8, that's the internal IP address.
Oh no, this is the external IP
Yeah,
address.
it's the external IP address.
Yeah.
So that means if you go to DuckDuckGo and say what's my IP address, that's the external, that's your external.
Yeah.
IP address.
Yeah, but that is your own network, but this is GCP's network.
Yeah. Okay. So you can go to there and say what's my IP address.
Yeah. You can. But this is like just a very convenient way to find it without having to run any command.
This one is because you configured it. That's why you know what.
Yeah.
Most of us don't know what is our IP address.
Yeah, true. I mean, you don't need to know also. Yeah. Okay. So, here we're just gonna include this thing called proxy params. So, like, if you use C, then I don't know. It might be intuitive. It's basically something like a header file. Then you can like use a function that comes with it. So the Excuse me, what?
I thought it was PARMS.
Yeah, params, like parameters.
Like parameters.
Yeah. So yeah, it's sort of like a header file. Then proxy params is one of the functions. So here we're gonna link our Unix socket. So alright, this URL is a bit confusing, but it is http://unix:/ Yeah. So it's protocol, then yeah. So
Like server type.
is is it sort of makes sense because HTTP is, like you're running a web server, so it's HTTP, but then it's a Unix socket, so that is the domain. Then the port is your Unix socket name, so it's gonna be /home chk/files/flask.sock. And yeah, so I don't know. The first time I wrote this, it was quite confusing, but I mean, if you see it, it's still a standard URL. It has the protocol, it has a domain name which is Unix, and then it has the port which is just the Flask socket. But yeah, this is the nginx configuration. Uh, yeah, I think that should be it. This part, the part here is the same as your working directory. The /home/ all that is the same as your working directory. Yeah.
So your virtual environment set up.
Mm. not not the virtual environment is if you go back to the systemd config. Yeah, you can see a working directory here. It's the same directory as that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Fast ENV. Oh, because ENV is
Yeah. So it creates it in the working directory. Yeah. Yeah. This is fine for now, but a common thing that people do is they will create a new. They'll usually create a Unix socket in temp, so that once it reboots, then the socket is empty basically. But this is fine also, because there is more of like a, if you want to be crazy about it sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. This should work. So all right. So if you go to /etc nginx, yeah, you can see two folders here. One's called sites available, and second one is called sites enabled. So you can see we've created our configuration in sites available, but in order for nginx to start using it, we need to use sites enabled. So instead of like copy pasting the file over, the easiest way to do it would be creating a soft link. So ln-s, then you go to slide etc nginx sites available flask, and you want to link it to sites enables, yeah, and run it as sudo. Yeah, so now if you go to sites enable, you should be able to see our Flask config. Yeah. Then what you can do is check for errors. So sudo nginx-t, and configuration file syntax is okay. And now all you need to do is restart nginx. So sudo systemctl restart nginx. Once you've done that, you can check the status. Invalid argument. Okay, I ran into this yesterday. Hmm. Okay, this is a Debian issue. And Give me a minute. Let me fix this.
Lights are still on.
Oh, the restroom is that way. Oh, I don't know. That one is closer, I think. Okay, nice. But it's running. seems to be a bug with nginx. Okay, nice. So nginx is working now. So if we go to our external IP, we should be able to see our website. There you go. There's our website running on nginx on gunicorn. It goes through nginx, through gunicorn, and finally to our Flask app. So if you want to see if it's really running on nginx, you can go to network here and restart, and there you can see our headers. So if you can see here, our server is nginx. Yeah, that is how you get your web server running with nginx on Flask. But yeah, there's a few issues. So say you just deploy your new shiny new app online, but it's still running on like this weird IP address, which is not really shareable. So the what you want to do is connect it to your domain. So some services make this really easy, but if you're running it on a VM, it's usually not that straightforward. So what you want to do is say you have a VM, if you have a domain. I mean, if you don't, it's okay. So I'm just gonna use this website here. So yeah. So what you basically want to do is connect your domain. So that's the next thing we're gonna cover, is connecting your domain to your VM. So what we're gonna be doing is creating a DNS, a sort of a DNS record. So if you don't know what a DNS is it's sort of like a phone book. So your browser goes to the DNS server. So say you go to like google.com. So what your web browser does is it goes to google.com, which has its DNS record. Then google.com will use the DNS and come back to the web server, come back to your web browser with an IP address. You can see it's like this IP address. Then the web browser then goes to the IP address to get the actual information. Yeah. Yeah. So so this is a name server. So what the DNS does is it has its own. So all these domain providers, they have their own name servers. So as you can see here, there's ns1name.com, ns2name.com. So what happens is, okay, this is a bit detailed, but what happens is when you go to a DNS, a resolver, the first thing that gets resolved is the TLD. So that's the top level domain, which is .live. Once you're inside .live, then it will try to find for this one. Then once that comes, that usually points to one of these 4 name servers. Then that will just point to your IP address. Yeah. So what you want to do is manage DNS records, and doing this is quite very simple. Is you just paste your IP address here. Yeah, and you just add record, and and that's literally just it's that simple really. It, just to go into a few more details, there's a few DNS types. So A is an IPv4 address, then 4A is a IPv6 address. So IPv6 is like
Yeah.
newer version of IPv4. Yeah.
Most of
Yeah. But the world has run out of IPv4 addresses, so it should probably use IPv6. Yeah, it's the adoption is really low right now because yeah. Yeah, then CNAME is also quite popular these days. Is CNAME is you point to another domain basically. So if you do static site hosting, CNAME is the most popular way to do it. So if you do static site hosting, you basically your files are in a bucket, and you just point to that bucket. So it's done using a CNAME. Then the rest of them are usually just for identification purposes. So if you want to verify your domain, usually what people will do is tell you to create a TXT record in your DNS entry, in your DNS records. Yeah. But yeah, to get your website hosted on your own domain, all you need to do is add an A record. Another thing you probably want to do is host it under www. So just add record, and that's it. If you want, so DNS usually takes a while to propagate. So if you want to check if the propagation is done, what you can do is, oh my god. Yeah, what you can do is use the Shoham Chakraborty live, and you can see 35.115. Yep. So it's already updated. So huh? Yeah, so if you basically go to shohamc1.live, you will see this nginx config. Now, this is not our website, and you might be thinking why. I mean, if you've been seeing our nginx config, then you can see our server name is still our external IP. So what happens is when you come through the domain, it will not match with the external IP as a server name. So it will just show the default one. So if you want to show your website here, what you will do is you will delete this and put in your website name, the complete domain here. Then you can just sudo system ctl restart nginx and check that it's running. And now, if it's not cached, you should be able to see a website on your own domain now. Yeah, but now if you go back to this one, then we will show the default one. Yeah. So what most websites will do as a security measure is disable access via your via the IP address. So this is usually done at the DNS level. So if you use Cloudflare, they will automatically disable direct IP access. But there is more optional and more advanced. So yeah, you have your website here, but if you're handling user credentials, any sort of authentication, you probably want some sort of security. So as you can see right now, our connection is not secure. So we probably want to fix that. So we have two ways to do this. So the first way is gonna be it's gonna be provided by your domain registrar. So if I go back here, you should be able to see this complete SSL certificate. So when you buy a domain, usually it comes with like one SSL certificate. Usually costs like $4 a year or something like that. And what you do is you generate a certificate signing request or CSR, and then it will just give you back an SSL certificate. But
Last time I bought a hospital, some US probably has an SSL master.
yeah, CSR, but this is paid and we don't like that. So what the EFF did, so the EFF came up with this thing called Let's Encrypt. So Let's Encrypt is free TLS certificates, and while the ones that come from your domain registrar are usually expire in 1 year, these expire in 60 days. So it, the validity is lower, but yeah, but it's free. But it's all open source. So people came up with a new thing called CertBot. So what CertBot is? Yeah, so CertBot is basically is an automated service that will just renew your certificate after 60 days. So you will get perpetual TLS certificates for free. Yeah, so it's very useful for if you want to host it on the cheap. Um, so the first thing you want, actually, let me try SSL here. Okay, I don't know. Okay, so to install certbot, you need snap. So sudo apt install snapd. Yeah,
Because
yeah,
you cannot install
yeah. So then you sudo snap install.
private host.
Yeah, the only other option other than using snap is building from source. Which I mean,
Oh, you mean from Tabo?
yeah, you just clone that git, then you make yeah.
Oh, from Makefile.
Yeah.
What? What? That's even worse.
Yeah, that's the only two options they provide.
In that case, much better because you use ADR, you have
Yeah.
one for
Yeah. Actually, I use Manjaro most of the time.
my other computer is Windows.
Yeah.
It has, I think Ye.
Yeah.
Comes with it.
Yep.
Right, so then Ye is Ye, Yahoo, they're all the same thing.
Yeah.
All the same thing.
Yeah, so you sudo.
You download the source code, you just say Ye, whatever.
Yeah.
Source code.
Yeah, but this is using Ubuntu. Like Arch is really not used in servers because it's rolling release, so it's more unstable. Yeah. Yeah.
Either that, no matter what you install, it will be free now.
Yeah, so you just sudo snap install certbot classic, and it's gonna download that. It's quite slow. But yeah, actually,
Well, there's other than Snap.
oh, they have app in this.
Well,
App and snap. Yeah. Snap is like Flatpak or app image. On Arch there's app.
app as in app image.
Yeah, Snap is
I
like
guess you could use that. There's one application that I still use on the browser using app.
don't know. Well, I've never heard of that.
Dropbox, you can there's a G package file for Ubuntu, but there's no such thing for Arch Linux.
Oh,
So the only way you can do it is F.
yeah, I don't know why this is so slow.
So I understand Snap is not really open source.
Oh no, it is open source, but it's like,
Because the source code.
is it?
Apparently canonical is the only one who has the source code of the release.
Yeah, I mean it's
Flat type they do release the source code.
yeah, it's run like canonical, so yeah, I don't know. It's probably not.
There's a lot of criticism also.
Yeah. Okay, once you've installed Certbot, you can create a soft link from snapbin certbot to user bin certbot. Once you've done that, you can just sudo certbot -- nginx, and they will just ask you to put your username. Yes. Press enter. It will check, it will verify, and yeah, that's it. that's that's how you use SSL on Certbot. So it's gonna make a few changes to our nginx config. So if you can see, so a few things that they've done here is, the first thing they've done is, um, if you're running on port 80, which is HTTP, it will automatically redirect you to HTTPS. And the other change is these 4 lines. So it basically uses the SSL certificate key, and basically is a config for the SSL. But I wouldn't recommend making any changes since it's managed by Certbot. So yeah, so if you go to your website now and restart, your connection is secure. Yeah. If you want to see the certificate, then it's certified by some DST root CA. But yeah, it's a valid certificate. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
The question I have here is comes default installed with Apache, and after that you get some error messages whenever you're installing Nginx.
Oh yeah. For that you can just stop the Apache service first.
Don't just stop. It's not
Yeah,
necessary
yeah.
to deinstall the
I mean, you can if you're not going to use it, but yeah, well, because Ubuntu by default, at least on Ubuntu server, they run Apache by default. So when you try to run nginx, since the port is already used, it will not allow you to use that. So you just stop Apache, then you run nginx.
The problem is I have some software that's running on like
Yeah.
LAMP, not
Yeah.
LPMP. So that's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, left is a good step. For the new, all the Python, JavaScript, everyone uses nginx now.
So LPMP. The problem is that some software they come all packaged together with LAMP.
Yeah, WordPress.
This is actually inside. WordPress, well, the one that I was working on was something called the project. It doesn't come with, not really LAMP, I think with Postgres. So So it's lamp with a P rather than lamp with an N.
Yeah.
So that was the problem. If you want to, you can convert it to nginx, but
Yeah,
it's
there's a
not
lot.
easily done.
I
You have
think
to
like
package
PHP
everything.
doesn't work very well with it.
Oh, PHP doesn't.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues with PHP.
It's not possible.
Yeah. And it doesn't work badly, it works very well with Apache. Yeah. At least in my experience, I haven't used PHP that much. So probably not the first person to ask for PHP. Yeah, most of my experience is using Python and JavaScript.
Is PHP something that's pretty old or something?
Yeah, yeah, I'm in uni and no one uses PHP. So
I mean,
it's popular, but
I tried playing with it once upon. This was years ago.
yeah,
This years ago. I tried playing with it once, and I said, "Well, it's better than HTML."
yeah. I mean, HTML is just smart, but PHP is like the real.
Okay.
Yeah,
It was somewhat easier to get things done.
yeah,
If you are trying to just get things done, PHP seemed to be the
yeah.
more logical choice.
Yeah. But now there's like lots of PHP alternatives. Like React is the most popular one.
Okay.
Yeah. PHP is slowly moving on.
I think I'm looking forward to this as
Yeah. Most popular one is React.
React is good.
Yeah. It's in JavaScript. Yeah.
Script